We are now live, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Work From Home Pythonistas, our community talk show where we get to meet amazing Pythonistas and learn how they use Python in their daily work, whether at home or beyond. I am Angelo, and I will be your host for today's session, alongside my co-host Rafa. Both of us are core volunteer of Python Philippines.
Ayan. So welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So before we proceed, I'd like to introduce muna what Work from Home Pythonista is for everyone new here. So essentially, it's a webinar talk show series where we interview certain Pythonistas representing various roles and industries to give people in the community an insight of what their typical workday looks like. We also showcase how Pythonistas think outside the box while being inside the comforts of their own homes or digital nomad setup. So with this event's motto features Pythonistas and their craft at home and beyond. So as for for this specific session, we'll have a quick talk from our speaker here, and then we'll have ample of time for Q&A later.
And before we start, we would like to thank our sponsors for today's session, Billy's, for making the show possible. So, Billy's is a flagship product of FDSC, a financial technology company building innovative retail products for Southeast Asia. They also have currently over 250 employees across five cities and two continents, all working toward a cheaper and fairer way for Filipinos to access financial services. Once again, thank you, Bill Is. Buy what you love, feel it with ease.
So, ayan. Our guest Pythonista for today is a data engineering consultant at Thinking Machines Data Science. He helps in designing end-to-end data solutions and platforms for strategic business outcomes. Complementing that is 5 total certifications across GCP, Azure, and AWS, a true cloud-agnostic Pythonista. Lastly, he is also a summa cum laude graduate from UP Diliman Computer Engineering. Today, let's unravel how such a background utilizes Python in his daily life.
All right. Is it G to present? Sorry.
Yep, yep, sure.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. Sorry. Let me. There. Can you see my screen?
Yep, although it's your home screen.
Oh shoot. Sorry. Let me do that again. How about now?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. First of all, thanks for inviting me. Um, it's my first time to be speaking at this kind of event. So glad to have been invited. Thankful for Stephanie for personally inviting me. But thank you for the organizers and volunteers for taking the time to organize this kind of initiative. For this session, I'll be talking about basically how I use Python day in and day out at teams, and also what was my Python journey from start to present. So before everything, let me introduce myself. So I'm Kyle. I'm actually a computer engineering graduate who turned into a data engineer. I like learning, building, and connecting with people through communities. So I'm currently a data engineering consultant at Thinking Machines. I graduated computer engineering from UPD. And on the side, I'm also uh, organizing events in GDG Davao, which is like a small developer community who works with Google technologies. Yeah. So what do I do as a data engineering consultant at TM? So essentially, what I do is I collaborate with clients, co-create solutions that address their needs. So it's not just about building whatever pipelines, whatever pipelines have the most, let's say, velocity, highest throughput, and whatnot. So you really have to talk with them, try to understand the business, and oftentimes have to loop in multiple people in sort of like a solutioning call to come up with like a very firm requirements. After that's done, I implement it in code. So for example, I do everything in Python. The platform, to be specific, is Databricks. And usually there's like a very tight feedback loop with a client. So after some iterative modifications or updates or improvements, you usually get back to them and ask them, hey, does this currently solve a pain point that you mentioned to us like a few calls ago, and so on. So that's usually how it goes. What I mean by data products, by the way, are kind of like assets that are packaged in a way such that it has metadata, documentation, data sharing options, and other attributes layered on top of just the data, so that customers, usually enterprise-wide, will be able to make use of that data for, kumbaga, self-service analytics or other use cases that they might have. So that's really like the scope of our role. So it's still very consulting heavy, but also engineering heavy in a way that you're both the implementer and also the ones collaborating directly with the stakeholders. So yes, that's my day in and day out at TM. So what do I do outside of work? Usually my downtime is a mix of a lot of things. So I don't strictly like do one sort of thing at a certain schedule. I do all of these whenever I have the free time. So I do reading. In fact, these two right here are my most recent reads. So if you don't know the Phoenix Project, anyone who's working in IT or like DevOps should read that. It's a pretty interesting book because it reads like a fiction. I mean, it is a fiction story, but it's still very much applicable to um, how DevOps works, or how IT teams work in all industries. So usually when people think IT, they're just talking about like strictly IT companies or technology companies, but actually IT is important for even banking or manufacturing and whatnot. This one right here is my current read. So basically it talks about how do you get people to uh, cooperate with you. So that's like its essence. How do you make people cooperate with you? And it's very important for um, engaging with clients. So it has some tips on how to frame things such that it's mutually beneficial, how to essentially like press the right buttons when talking to people. Um, outside reading, I play video games. I join and organize community events. So this is actually one event that I am joining. Um, outside that, I also organize events through GDG Davao. I watch YouTube videos. This would range from tech videos to literally just anything that catches my attention. I like cooking and baking because I love sort of like the mix of arts and science in it. I do bouldering, but not too often. So it's like a new hobby that I acquired. I also like making matcha. So I buy matcha powder and make my own lattes at home. And lastly, I try new cafes every now and then and see which ones are good for co-working, which ones are only good for the food and whatnot. So that's what I do outside of work. What my typical day looks like is pretty structured, but can vary from time to time. Usually my core hours are 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. So if you notice, I'm very much a morning person. I notice that when it reaches like say 4 p.m., my brain turns to mush and I can't be as productive as I was in the morning. So in any case, if I do need to work still, I usually continue working at around 8 p.m. or after dinner. So um, essentially all deep work goes in the morning to early afternoon. And then if there's anything that's happening um, beyond 4 p.m., that's usually going to be meetings or calls that are not as mission critical. Kumbaga. Um, I noticed a question that asked how I compartmentalize my day. So what I got from that is basically how do I make sure that I'm not mixing work and life. Kasi 'di ba work from home, it's usually the case na work and non-work stuff get intertwined together. So what I usually do is do time-based partitioning or compartmentalization. So I time block things that I do strictly for work and things that I do perhaps outside work but is still like in the lines of productivity. So like let's say learning, I also time block that. And anything outside those time blocks, I can make use of it for whatever I want. So it could be rest, could be doing my hobbies and whatnot, so that I don't work when I don't have to, and I also don't um do anything outside work during my core working hours. So that's my tip. If you're doing time blocking, it's pretty good if you're very sensitive to time. Other people I know just parang they just have like checklists throughout the day. So parang let's say clean the lawn or whatever. Pero for me, I personally want to like exactly pinpoint when I'm doing the task. Just so that I am allocating enough time for it and it doesn't interfere with other things I have. Um, yeah, so outside core working hours, it's gonna be for unwinding or upskilling or reading, whatever. So anything outside 8:30 to 5:30 is literally anything. So what equipment do I use for work from home? So I have a Logitech mouse. It's my has been my workhorse for quite some time. Um, yeah, that's the thing. That's pretty much my prized possessions. Work from home. I also have a wide monitor from Xiaomi, and it's pretty good because you can essentially fit in two regular sized like screens within one equipment. So yeah, that's what I use to display apart from my MacBook. I also have this I don't know what you call it, pero it's an attachment where you put on top of your monitor so that light comes from above. I guess it's to help with vision problems and whatnot. I also have a mechanical keyboard so that I can work comfortably in a decent posture instead of instead of reaching for my MacBook because it's on a laptop stand. And I also have an office chair. I do not know the exact brand. So this has been my chair since I was in college. So yeah, this is my most important equipment for work from home. Now let me talk about basically my Python journey. So how did I start with Python and parang what were the changes as I went through my journey, kumbaga. So my Python journey started around 2014. So I remember I was in 8th grade high school. Um, we had a summer break going into grade 9. So I used that time to learn Python. So it started pretty small. It's super basic. It's the kind of script that parang takes in numbers lang and then does some math operations on it and then places the value dun sa um, terminal. So if you could imagine it, it's probably as simple as like 1 plus 1, or sorry, sum of A plus B, and then the user inputs A and B, and then it outputs yung sum. Other projects I remember are things that parang take your name. So the user inputs like a string, and then the output would be a message na naka-format with the string as like the actual value. So super basic. I do remember in high school we parang progressed a bit, so we did have some OOP concepts, but that was in Java, so not Python. So back then my Python was pretty basic up until like end of high school. So ayun. By 2019 I started university. So my course was computer engineering. And I distinctly remember using Python for a couple of things because most of our labs were either C++ or it was in um, like a lower level language. So it could be Verilog, it could be MIPS, it could be even be MATLAB. Pero for the Python stuff, I remember we used it for um, information theory classes and labs. So parang simulating entropy, simulating how data is kumbaga shaped by certain factors. So that's how we use Python there. In 2023 was the time I also had I started my thesis. So my thesis project used Python, and essentially yung concept niya is it helps adjust the difficulty of the question based on the user. So what I mean by this is yung pain point right now is, for example, students are given reading materials that are not yet parang tailored to their capabilities. So kumbaga, standard says grade 4 readings are like this. Pero we know among grade 4 students, the reading skill also varies quite a lot. So there's a lot of variance, and you can't really just say anything grade 4 will be given to the grade 4 students. So what we did was it was like an NLP based platform that parang fine tunes the difficulty of the readings based on the user's skill. So the user's skill is parang quantified by how well they do on the multiple choice tests na also based on the reading. So yun yung concept, and we built that using Python. And our framework for that time was, I believe, scikit-learn. And then the application was deployed using Django. So yeah, that's how we used Python for our thesis. Before my last year of university, I was basically done with everything except for a mid-year class. So essentially, I was free for like the entire year and I was just waiting for graduation. So during that time, I worked as a back-end software engineer. So I was primarily working with the Django REST framework to create back-end APIs for our project. So yeah, you could imagine certain endpoints just built purely on Python using the Django framework. Now it's 2024 and I joined TM. Um, I'll talk more about this later, but essentially, now the focus has shifted less on backend APIs and more on ETL pipelines. So that could be in ingestion, that could be in transformation, or that could be some other process. But for me personally, the Python stuff lies in the transformation part. So transforming the data that's already ingested into something usable is how I use Python. Right. So again, for TM, I'm pretty sure Python is the bread and butter for everything that we do, or at least the majority of things that we do. So for me personally, my main Python use case is, sorry, my top Python tooling is PySpark. So I'm working with a client right now, which is like a financial institution, and their data analytics platform is Databricks. So I'm using PySpark for the transformation code. Aside from PySpark, I also use SQL, but majority of it is in PySpark. Outside my main projects, I've tried using the following for the bootcamp I underwent. So we have DBT for parang SQL orchestration. We have Dagster for like orchestration as well. But I think Dagster is more asset based compared to the other orchestration tools. I also used Airflow. So this is the more general purpose task orchestration tool that's built on Python. And then, of course, we have Pandas. But to be honest, I don't use it that much if I already use PySpark. So these are the following tools I've been using for Python in my current role. But as far as I know, um, the Python ecosystem in TM is super vast. Like other teammates are using other Python tools. For example, yung ML team perhaps are using PyTorch or LangChain for Gen AI stuff. Software engineering team might use Fast API, and so on. So it's really super varied. But for me, this is my tooling right now. Yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. So I think we can go to the free-flowing Q&A part.
So, yeah, and thank you, Kyle, for sharing your experiences. No, so yeah, that was a really nice session. So, does anyone here from the audience have questions for Kyle here? Baka interested kayo with anything that he shared. Siguro before we wait for questions from the audience, I have one question here. Since I'm personally interested in adopting the time blocking culture
Yeah.
of life. So you mentioned it naman earlier. So if it's okay to ask you, what does your time block look like? And how long did it take you to adjust with time blocking
Mm.
as a whole?
Right. Good question. So personally, I've learned how to time sorry, how to time block in TM because we practice this culture like um we practice this culture like period. So whenever we have like a meeting slated for a certain time, we block it. We send invites to people who who need it or who are involved in it. And we also use time block to literally like block off focus time. So even if you don't have a meeting, people block off time so that other people are like don't schedule time during that block. So I do not know if I can show you like my exact time block, pero
It's okay. It's okay.
basically it yeah, you can imagine it as like there are like squares everywhere. Um most of it are meetings. So everything outside that I just use it for like heads down. So we call things na work but not meetings as heads down. Um and then kung meeting siya, like of course it's called a call or whatever. Um for personal life, I just schedule it like I would heads down time. So for example, today, let's say October 11 at 5 to 6, I would put time block here for Python PH, whatever. And then for any prep for it, I would schedule it separately just to make it easier to parang distinguish from each other. So yun yung time blocking tip.
And so thank you. So like do you set like actual time blocks sa personal calendar mo outside work?
Yes, I do. So
Mm.
I think, but to be honest, I haven't updated it this week. So I'm so
Okay.
sorry. But
That's fine. That's fine.
I do have like separate calendars for it. So for example, later, let's say 8 to 10, and then it's specifically for learning, I would block off some time. So let's say learn DS Pi. So ayun, something like that. And then of course naka-color code siya. So anything related to, let's say, community, attend, X would also be time blocked.
Okay. Sige, thank you for answering that question, Kyle. No? So we have a question here from the audience.
Hmm?
So, I think yung unang question here from our audience would be, aside from preference and a specific reason why you use Databricks instead of other competing platforms?
Hmm. Right. So good question, MM. Actually, the main reason why it's Databricks is mostly because the client already has an existing Databricks workspace. So for context, the client is using an Azure-based infrastructure for for majority of its infra, and their analytics platform on top of that is Databricks. So it's not really like we recommended it to them, but there have been cases where the consulting engagement is more of like how do I call it? Parang it's like a day one thing. So day one thing is like parang you're recommending what kind of infra they're using, what kind of analytics platform and so on. So to go back to your question, it's more on the client already has a Databricks workspace. They intend to use Databricks for a pretty decent amount of time. So they're not looking to uh, parang migrate to, let's say, Snowflake in the next couple of years, as it's medyo long-term, what do you call this? Medyo long-term project yung Databricks. And they intend to use it as an enterprise-wide analytics platform. So you could imagine certain business verticals, let's say finance will use Databricks for daily reporting, but let's say yung other teams are using it to um, their own use case. But essentially, this makes it because this makes it easier because there's data sharing. Data governance controls are very robust sa Databricks. And you don't have to worry about um, a lot of the overhead since it's like a pretty managed platform compared to the others.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we have a follow-up question here from MM. So, with all that features that you mentioned, what if it's a day one scenario? Would you still suggest or prefer Databricks, or some would you like to discover some other platform?
Okay. So this is very interesting because the answer I would um the thing I would answer to this is it really depends. So we do have like some scoping frameworks to recommend certain kinds of analytics platforms depending on the client. So I wouldn't just like recommend it based on like a day one scenario. It really depends. So I think a very high level parang platform recommendation framework would be number one, if you have an Azure infra, then I would say recommend Databricks. If they don't, then let's say I would recommend Snowflake because um, it's I would imagine it's more performant compared to Databricks, um, and so on. So again, um, really depends on a lot of different factors, and it would require like people to do interviews with them to know what their use case really is. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you for answering that question. So we have another question here from the YouTube live stream. So how did you start learning to use PySpark and DBT?
Okay. Great. So question from Python PH themselves. So for actually, interestingly enough, I've learned these two while I was in TM. So I had no like prior experience with any of these before I joined TM. Um, so I think the learning for this is like twofold. So first one is we had like an internal boot camp so that yung mga what they call it talent engine sprouts who are like essentially yung new hires would would get to a point where they can they have the basic competencies to use these in their work. So we had like a 6-week boot camp, and I think around 3 days was allocated for DBT. So that's for DBT. Um, for PySpark, I just learned it on the job. So when I was assigned a client, they were looking for someone who knows Databricks and PySpark. And essentially, I was like uh, kind of forced to like learn it na. So I spent first few days to like really upskill on it. So get like fundamental knowledge, get yourself at a point where you can upskill yourself along the way na lang. So first few days were more on yung basic syntax, perhaps yung architecture ng Spark itself, and also Databricks because we were using PySpark within Databricks, and it has its own quirks na separate from just using PySpark with your like own compute setup, whatever. Um, so after those 2 days of like very intentional upskilling, the rest of it is case-to-case scenario. So for example, I needed to know how to decrypt, for example, in PySpark. Then I would like allocate some time within the day to like do my own due diligence and then research on how to implement it. Um, yeah, that's really how it goes. Like you're really expected um to just be at a level where you can do things pretty much independently. And you can never prepare for everything 100%. So if anything comes by, time block some time in your calendar to like parang solve it. If you can solve it by your own, you can escalate it to like a senior to help you. Ayun, so again, I recommend you to reach a point where you can like do things pretty independently, and then anything else you just learn along the way.
Yun, so thank you, Sir Kyle. So there's also another question here by MM. So question niya ay, in learning PySpark and DBT, do you do it during your work hours daw po?
Yeah. So for that question, for PySpark, yes, work hours because it's tied to a client project. So you could like reasonably attribute yung work hours to the billable client time. So it's yes for PySpark. For DBT, since it's not tied to yung project deliverables, it's done outside work hours. So yung times ko outside 5:30 would be for DBT and whatnot. And one particular project I did to upskill on DBT is like it's like basically a data platform. So I have parang a side project I did a while ago na my data warehouse was BigQuery, and then I have a DBT um sort of like SQL pipeline to orchestrate yung flow of data from bronze to gold. So yeah, essentially it's done outside work hours.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for that. We also have another question here from Renan. So if you will start from scratch or day one, what steps will you do to become a data engineer? Since especially since you mentioned earlier that you had a web dev or um, back end background. Also,
Mm.
a lot of tools are available in data engineering like Snowflake, PySpark, Airflow. So how would you prevent being confused for all the existing tools right now?
Yeah, so that's a pretty relevant question, Renan. I did mention that I came from like a back-end engineer background, so that's like pretty similar to web dev naman. I think my main uh kumbaga entry point to data engineering is that during my time as a back-end engineer, I worked closely with our cloud deployments. So yung mga cloud resources that we had, I also had some influence in it. So I think because of my experience with the cloud, and since most data engineering tasks would require you to work on cloud resources, for example, that's a good entry point for you to um, sort of grow yung data engineering skills mo. Um, Yeah, so I would say perhaps start with cloud foundations. And then if you really think that you like data engineering, then you can look for like data engineering specific verticals. So for example, for Google Cloud, you do yung foundational cloud cert, and then you realize now, oh, I really like this aspect or this set of services for Google Cloud, and I want to take it a step further. Now, what you do is you like study yung mga quirks niya. So you might study BigQuery for data warehousing. You might learn about PubSub for stream ingestion, data flow for yung data pipelines on cloud. So things like that. Um, yeah, so number one is cloud. I would also imagine yung other entry point mo to data engineering would be more like analytics facing. So if you're already doing like SQL, you're already doing some data analysis with pandas, or like even if you know PySpark already, then that could be one entry point to data engineering. Although in TM it's slightly termed differently. We call it analytics engineering for like more data transformation focused work. So yeah. And then to answer your other question, how to prevent being confused, I would first think about it in a tool agnostic way. So in TM, we try to be like cloud agnostic, right? So think about yung problem and yung solution fit to it. Think of the available options before you like box it into like a specific framework. So you don't think agad na, oh, this client wants to do this, let's do it on Databricks. You have to like scope it out further na, oh, what's a compelling reason to do it on Databricks versus all the other alternatives? So why not Snowflake? Why not BigQuery, whatever. And then once you have like some patterns that you're noticing, so for example, oh, usually enterprise clients like Databricks, then you can parang fixate on that. You can like focus on upskilling your Databricks knowledge specifically, because it's the most relevant tool for your use case. So I would suggest that approach. Parang find patterns in what use cases your clients are looking for, and then only upskill in those areas. And then once you've found some time to like upskill in other areas, then you would also parang grow in those other toolings. Ayun.
Ayun. So, there's also another question here, Kyle, for Gyro de Leon. So, his question would be, for someone studying Python recently, how would you practice Python effectively beyond just coding exercise?
Right. Um, so this is like a pretty interesting question because I don't study Python like it's like a in a textbook style. So I don't do it like front to back, like cover to cover. I usually just focus on things that are relevant. So what I do is um I use like the data camp courses because I really like how it has parang a widget where you can actually code and then
Session.
run like your Python code directly on data camp. So I use their courses um to parang refresh my memory on certain Python concepts. But I think on top of yung foundational knowledge mo, I think you have to do side projects. And more importantly, these side projects would have to be parang relevant. So don't do side projects na like run of the mill, like web dev to-do list apps. Do something unique and that ticks all the requirements you want to upskill on. So for example, if you really want to learn how to, let's say, uh, uh, how to do like SQL orchestration in DBT, you have to focus on that as a side project. So yes, tie your side projects to whatever competencies you want to build. That's my tip.
So that's a really good advice, Kyle. No? I actually like that advice.
Yeah.
So we're finally on to our last question for this session. So it's from MM again. What is your opinion on using production notebooks, for example, in workflows in Databricks?
Okay. Actually, I really like this question because this has been my observation, and it's a very weird quirk ng Databricks kasi they use notebooks in production. So I really like this because it hits home. Um, I've asked several of my colleagues what they think about it as well. And generally, all of us are like weirded out by this. Kasi it's just weird, diba? Like, how I would imagine it is we're using notebooks like locally. Usually we use Python notebooks to learn something. So for example, you're learning pandas. You use a Python notebook, diba? You usually use it for non-production stuff. But for Databricks, it is like the recommended production thing, aside from like just a Python script. So I honestly don't like it because it's so jarring. It's so jarring. And yung worst part is Cursor and other like AI assisted IDEs are so good compared to what we have sa Databricks. So sa Databricks, we have yung I forgot what you call it, but they also have an AI assistant within the interface or console. But it's very slow, and I don't think its outputs are as good as ChatGPT or like generally other coding models. So a very funny workaround I do is, for example, I have like a complex task. Instead of asking yung native Databricks coding assistant, I would ask ChatGPT in a browser. So like I copy paste it um instead of doing that. Whereas 'di ba yung sa cursor, you could choose your model. So for example, you use Sonnet 4.5, and then the user experience is way better dun sa IDEs compared to yung production notebooks sa Databricks. So that's my opinion. Honestly, I would prefer if I'm doing like a pipeline on my IDE instead of doing it on notebooks.
Yeah, so very relatable answer na. Very familiar. So, very last question, may pahabol from Joshua. Do you also deploy models in production sa Databricks?
Yeah, so interesting question. By models, are you referring to like ML models? Or are you referring to like models as in it could be like a deterministic model? Joshua. ML. Okay. So personally, I haven't done an ML model in production, not for a client. So what I've worked on is more of like it's like a business rules based model. Um, so business rules based model, that would mean na everything is deterministic based on whatever rules um they have in place. Now my role here would be to codify whatever rules they have and then create the transformation pipeline. So I haven't done that in production, but what I do know is this is a super lengthy procedure just because you have to clear several layers, especially if your client is like a heavily regulated industry. So for example, financial institutions, you'd have to undergo like certain risk assessments. You have to do like data governance checks for it and whatnot. So it's a pretty lengthy exercise, and you would also have to be sort of accountable dun sa accuracy of your model, which is like a pretty tough situation to be in. So yeah, short answer, I haven't. It's only been deterministic models.
Okay, sige, thank you. I think that's it for the Q&A section. So thank you very much, Kyle. Before we wrap things up, We at Python Philippines would like to promote the upcoming Python Asia, coming this March 2026. Currently, we are calling for proposals. So if anyone here is interested in an international level speakership about Python, this is your perfect opportunity.
Wow, that was an amazing announcement. And we're also excited to have the Python Asia 26 to happen here in the Philippines once again. And of course, thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing your journey and all those valuable insights. So before we officially wrap up, Kyle, do you have any announcement or upcoming projects that you'd like to share with our participant?
Um, yes, I do actually. So, we have PyCon in sorry, I forgot the exact term, but we have a Python conference in Davao like around 2 weeks from now. So for people who are in Davao, um, please attend that. Yeah, although do wait for announcements because I think they're formalizing yung go or no go decision due to the recent earthquakes. But for people in Davao, please support that event for our Durian Pie organizers.
Okay, sige. Thank you, Kyle, for that announcement. And yes, so if anyone's interested, there's an upcoming PyCon Davao in 2 weeks from now. So for now, before we say goodbye, let's take our virtual photo op muna. So if anyone can turn on their cameras, that would be greatly appreciated. So, ayan. May hahabol pa ba? Wait, I'm not familiar sa Zoom. Can anyone, Angelo, can you take the screenshot ba? Or tap?
Sure, sure. So, may
Okay.
habol pa guys. So, I think yun. Wait lang. Yung ano ata, yung yun. Bali, yan. So, alright. So, let's 1, 2, 3, smile. One more time. So, actually, we have an ano po, parang may ano kami kay kay Python na where we can bring ano yung madadala mo sa ano mo, table mo. So, on that post po, pwede natin, gawin natin din sa work from home Pythonista. So, baka may things po kayo na malapit sa nyo, and then we can have that as ano po, Pythonista post po. So, ah, ayan. So, 1, 2, 3, smile. Ayun. Wait po, one more time, one more time. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay na po. Thank you po.
All right, thanks guys.
Right, that's all for today. So again, thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing with us your experiences and all the participants for joining us. So if anyone here can answer the evaluation form, we're open for comments and recommendations to help us improve this event in the future.
Yun.
And yeah,
And that's all for today. Again, thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing with us your experience and all the participants for joining us. See you again for the next Work from Home Pythonistas. Happy weekend, everyone.
thank you everyone.